Hello, CTSNet friends. Welcome to this extremely special podcast. I'm delighted that today we're being joined by Sami Syed, who is our fabulous congenital editor. We have so much for you today. We have 3 fabulous papers. We have a paper on pulmonary atresia and intact ventricular septum. We have a fabulous paper, Can You Stent a Retrograde Aortic Dissection and Disparities in Esophagectomy? We've got some brilliant videos, a really novel way to address a VSD. We've got a great residence video for aortic and mitral, and the highlight, I think, is a wonderful video by Sami Syed. So don't go away. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll get stuck into it. Thank you so much, Sami Syed, for joining us. It's an absolute privilege to have you here. Sami Syed is a wonderful congenital surgeon. He is Chief of Pediatric and Adult Congenital Surgery at the Maria Ferrari Children's Hospital in Westchester, which is in New York. Thank you so much for joining us, Sami. Maybe we could start by just getting you to say hi. Tell us all about your practice and what you do in New York.
Thank you, Jules, for this great opportunity, and thanks to CTSNet for ongoing support. As you may have mentioned, I'm a pediatric and adult congenital heart surgeon, currently the chief of Maria Ferrari Children's Westchester Medical Center in New York. My practice currently is focused on congenital heart disease from neonates to elderly, and I do the full spectrum. I moved to New York here last year, where we started the program, and we're getting busier and busier every day.
Fantastic. And obviously we love you, not just because you're our senior congenital editor, but I think you have submitted over 50 surgical videos to CTSNet. So that's absolutely wonderful. And we're so pleased to have you there. And so we'll get stuck right in. And because Sami was here, we've chosen a few congenital papers. And the very first one that we wanted to profile is in this month's Annals of Thoracic Surgery. This is by Eva Chung and the people at Cincinnati Children's Hospital with senior author Ilias Iliopoulos. And the title of it is Procedural Outcomes of Pulmonary Atresia with Intact Ventricular Septum in Neonates. And this is a multi-center study. So they've got a really big group, 279 neonates with this particular 10 years of experience, and they profiled the different ways you can fix this. So 28% had right ventricular decompression, 54% of them had a systemic to PA shunt or just ductal shunt only, and 36 underwent both, and 11 got transplants. The thing that struck me as a non-congenital surgery is that there was a really high complication rate. That 20% have severe adverse outcomes. So this is really high-risk surgery, including 8% mortality, 13% CPR, 6% stroke, and a lot got mechanical circulatory support. So I thought that was really striking. And maybe Sami, maybe tell us a little bit about what you thought about this paper and what you do for children like this.
I think the advantage of the paper is the multi-center nature of it. It's coming from a 19-center. However, there are several limitations for the paper. I think it's understood that the complication rate in this group of patients are not uncommon because of the rarity of the illness and also the challenging nature of pulmonary atresia intact septum, where many patients may have coronary artery fistula, coronary right ventricular dependent coronary circulation, etc. The paper really looked at the very early outcomes, and what is striking is all the authors on the paper are from critical care and cardiology, with no surgeon actually on the paper. The multi-center nature, although it's good when you have a rare illness like this, but also we have to be careful about interpretation, because this is a very large heterogeneous group of patients with a very big spectrum with PAIVS. There was no clear definition for some of the decision-making process was not clear. Why these patients had a shunt versus a stent versus RV decompression. So it was very focused on just the early outcomes, whatever the procedure was. But what we don't know is why some group went to this versus the other approach. The RV-dependent coronary circulation, the authors mentioned, unless the report explicitly says RV-dependent coronary circulation, so you can understand that there could be some patients who being missed. We don't have everybody who had RV-dependent coronary circulation. Also, they included bilateral coronary atresia, categorized as left coronary atresia. So, but this is two different severity. The cath preoperative was done only in 82% of the patient, not in everybody. So there is a possibility that you don't have all the spectrum, and also you have a very large heterogeneous group. However, I see that the one of the messages that are actually important here, which was written in a comment section, but not in the conclusion, which is those patients who had RV decompression in addition to additional source of pulmonary blood flow, like a shunt or a PDA stent, did actually better compared to those who had RV decompression only or shunt or stent only. And the authors explained the theory behind that when you have two pulmonary blood flow sources. And I would have expected this something to go into the conclusion of the paper. Overall, I think it gives an idea about how challenging this group of patients, but also it doesn't include any preterm or low weight. So these are some of the challenges that we see, but we don't know what the right answer for them. And as you may have asked, how do we manage this? It really depends on the anatomy and the Z-score of the tricuspid valve and the size, but it can range from a 2-ventricle or a 1.5 ventricle repair into a single ventricle repair. So it's a very large spectrum.
Well, thank you very much for that insight. Certainly amazing to get your view from that, and well done, and a great paper to check out. But that's wonderful. Let's move on. And I think Sami and I, we've both done dissections in the past. Luckily, we have moved on, but I've always dreamed of the day when we never need to do a surgical aortic dissection repair. And this paper, selected by the EACTS staff, is from Osaka in Japan by Ozumi and Matsuda from Osaka in Japan. And it's in the European Journal this month. And it says the surgical outcome of thoracic endovascular aortic repair for retrograde Stanford type A dissection. And I thought, wow, isn't this great? Maybe we'll finally be able to not repair these. But actually, when you look at this paper, out of 359 patients that they have found to have a retrograde type A dissection over the course of 8 years, 83 were finally diagnosed as the retrograde. And actually, this paper is just on a very small group, just 18, in which they didn't do surgical repair on. Now, what were these surgical repairs? Well, mostly the tear was fairly distal. There was only 2 in the first zone and a couple in zone 2, and most were after the subclavian artery. So most of them could just bang a TEVAR stent in. They did do a few debranching, and then in this very, very select group, they actually had excellent outcomes. They showed very little complications. One person got a bit of an endo leak. One person did need open conversion, but other than that, they thrombosed the false lumens. The patients got discharged, and it did quite well. So only 18 patients. It's the beginnings of maybe reducing the amount of patients we need to operate on. So it's an interesting paper to take a look at. Sami, what was your thoughts on this paper?
I agree with you, Joel. I think it was a nice article, despite a small group of patients, but it opened our minds that this is a good option for selected patients, and the authors indicated their way of selection in the manuscript. It has to be clearly the primary entry site has to be in the descending aorta, visualized on the preoperative CT, and could be easily closed by the stent. In addition, they still say that the primary treatment is still open for some patients who are not candidate for this approach. However, I think the outcomes are quite good actually for this type of challenging disease. But still, we need a long-term follow-up to determine the value of this approach.
Great, thank you very much. So watch this space. One day they'll invent a stent for type A dissection, but not quite today. So the third paper we've got for you is really interesting, quite different paper to the others. And this paper was by Christine Alvarado, Christopher Toe, and it was on the racial socioeconomic disparities that affect access to thoracic surgeons for esophagectomy. So really very interesting. This was from the Cleveland Medical Center in the USA. And they went and looked at the Premier Healthcare database to have a look for people having an esophagectomy. This was between 2015 and 2019, so before the pandemic. They got nearly 1,000 patients in America. And the really interesting thing is only half, 43%, were treated by a thoracic surgeon, and over half were treated by non-thoracic surgeons, by general surgeons. And they looked into the reasons for this. And actually, they were really quite shocking. So basically, uninsured versus insured, you were 3 times more likely to see a thoracic surgeon if you were insured. The other race other than white American was 1.7 versus 8%, rural hospital versus urban, 3% versus 13%. Metastatic cancer, thoracic surgeons will operate on you significantly less if you have metastatic cancer, and white patients were much more likely to see a thoracic surgeon than not. So a really stark indication of demographic change on whether or not you're going to see the very best surgeon for your esophagectomy. And Sami, I wonder what you think about this disparity in America as being there in America, and whether you see this in congenital or cardiac surgery as well, or is this specific to esophagectomy?
No, I think we see this in congenital heart disease and in children undergoing pediatric cardiac surgery. In fact, there are several literature recently as we looked at the trends in the racial, ethnic, and healthcare disparities associated with pediatric cardiac surgery outcomes. And it goes both ways. There's clear differences. However, in some literature, there was no mortality difference, but there could be a difference in the length of stay or the morbidities, etc. So I think it's important to always think that this may affect the way we treat patients and the way the patient can get access to cardiac surgeons.
Wow, that really is amazing in 2023 that we have these disparities. And I wonder what you at home think. In your country, do you get major disparities? I truly think in the UK, we do have quite an even access to surgery. That's because of our national health system. It's not perfect, but at least it's maybe a little bit even. So maybe what's it like in your country? Maybe check it out. Give us a little link in the show notes below and tell us what you've found in your country. So now we're going to have a little handover to Cam Lind, and she's going to tell you what you can find in the job center on CTSNet this week.
Are you on the lookout for a new job in cardiothoracic surgery? Hundreds of open positions are waiting for you at CTSNet's Career Center. Through ctsnet.org, you can browse jobs and sign up for custom job alerts direct to your inbox. For an even more enhanced experience, create a free account and upload your resume so employers and recruiters can find you. Happy job hunting! Now, back to the beat.
Thank you, Cam, for giving us that overview of what's available on our job center. So we've got 3 absolutely wonderful videos for you. You're going to find these fascinating. And the first one really stood out for me. I thought this is brilliant. I'd never heard of this before. And this was for VSDs, the thing we absolutely hate. Fills our heart with horror when the cardiologist phones you with a VSD and you go, oh my God. But this is a brilliant one. This is a novel method. This is by Mario Torre at the University of Naples and Enrico Costioni and it says post-infarction VSD closure without a ventriculotomy, not cutting into the ventricle. And I thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. And it absolutely is. So they've created a method by which instead of cutting the ventricle, they open up the aorta, they open up the tricuspid, and they do the operation through these two access sites. They create this brilliant three-layered patch. On the ventricular side, they create another patch that they access through the tricuspid, and they show us how they very cleverly suture it in with some really good animation, some really good graphics. And I thought, absolutely fantastic. And then basically, you know, what's there to bleed? Just closing the aortotomy line and closing the right atrial line. So really wonderful, really interesting. And Sammy, what did you think of this as a congenital surgeon?
I think it's a good thought. However, we've done several similar to these. I think literature has in the congenital world, especially in the multiple muscular ventricular septal defect, where you actually close it in a way as if you're putting a device. So the two patch, and you pass the string through the one side of the septum to the other. So I think it's putting this into the adult world is definitely worth to think about it. Try to avoid the ventriculotomy. But I will expect it's not possible with all post-infarct VSD in this area, because as you can see, probably may need to be in a higher location to be able to be accessible in an adult heart compared to a child heart. But definitely it's a technique that's worth to think about in some of these situations.
And to me, I've never even considered doing this, but do you have any hints and tips about how to get the best access possible through the tricuspid or through the aortic valve? Is it just good exposure, or is it more case selection, make sure it's high and small as a defect?
I think it's very important to look at the images pre-op and maybe consider a cross-sectional image like a CT to be able to get an exact measurement for the defect, as the authors explain, and to design your patch in a way that's it's at least 2 or 3 centimeters bigger than the actual defect, so you don't have any residual. So I think it's definitely needs a planning carefully pre-op.
Great, fantastic. And as ever, the congenital surgeons are ahead of us adults surgeons, done it before. And so, yeah, we've got so much to learn through sharing our experiences. So thank you very much for that. The second video is absolutely wonderful, especially if you're a trainee, a resident, and you would like to see a beautifully performed aortic valve replacement and mitral valve replacement. Tom Verbelen has done a wonderful video with the help of Medtronic. He put a head camera on. It's a live in a box. So he's actually narrating it and talking about it as he does an aortic valve replacement and a mitral, and you literally feel like you're the surgeon. So he places an Avalus Medtronic valve into the aortic position and a mosaic into the mitral. Just really nice, really clear. It's just about exactly the right length, and I highly recommend this for anybody who just wants to see one of these. Maybe you're soon going to be doing your first one. I would certainly recommend this. What did you think about this, Sammy?
I think Dr. Verbelen did a great job with a clear video showing a double valve replacement, the steps that's very good for residents and fellows to consider. And he also mentioned a few tips and pitfalls as he putting the valves in, sizing, which to do first and why, etc. So I think it was very educational.
Absolutely. So check out that video, which is available right now on our front page on CTSNet. So Sammy, it's the highlight, the very best video probably of the year, who knows? But you've just submitted this brilliant video, and we're going to be profiling it this week, all about anomalous aortic origin of the right coronary artery from the wrong sinus of Valsalva. And you give us two strategies about that. So maybe tell us about this issue, how common it is, and tell us about your video.
I think the way we thought to make this video this time is anomalous origin of the right coronary artery from the left sinus of Valsalva is actually diagnosed more frequent than we think, because patients frequently get cross-sectional images, and here you go, you have an anomalous coronary, what to do with it. We did not want to go into the controversy about when to operate and what the decision, rather than to focus on the technique. There are two famous techniques that we tried to put them together in one video, so everyone can understand the differences in the thought process between unroofing of the coronary artery and translocation or reimplantation of the anomalous coronary. It's very important to look at the position of the coronary ostium in the wrong sinus and the presence or absence of an intramural course. The unroofing is the procedure that's preferred for coronaries that has an intramural course, where you unroof the coronary artery, and therefore the ostium will be relocated back into the normal or the expected sinus. And there are a few tips and pitfalls, of course, to try to make sure you don't compromise the commissure of the aortic cusp, which is always close by. And therefore, this was demonstrated in a 15-year-old who was symptomatic before the procedure, and the other was more in an adult patient who had anomalous origin of the coronary artery. It was actually quite high, but it ran in an interarterial, which means between the aorta and the pulmonary roots. And we translocated or reimplanted that by excising a button from the aorta and moving the coronary artery. And one of the important tips here is, if we consider reimplantation for the coronaries that does not have intramural course, it always have to go higher on the aorta, especially in obese patients or when the right ventricle has a lot of epicardial fat, because that can kink the coronary artery very easily. So demonstrating these two techniques together, I think, is helpful to understand the differences between the two strategies.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. Beautifully demonstrated. It's a really wonderful video. And just as a second question, seeing as you say you didn't get into the issue of when to fix these, maybe give us a little 2 minutes sort of when should somebody, if they approach this or see this, when should they recommend somebody have surgery, and when can you tell them to go away and just have conservative follow-up?
I think there has to be, there are multiple factors that are considered here. Number one is the age of the patient. So finding it in a 60-year-old is different than finding it in a 15-year-old. The presence or absence of symptoms make things easy as regarding the decision. However, the difficulty when you have asymptomatic patient with anomalous, especially right coronary, where we all worry about the risks of sudden death, and there are many controversy about the risk of sudden death versus the risk of the actual operation itself. However, there are certain features that can be considered when we look at the CT scan, what we call a high-risk features, such as long intramural course, a slit-like orifice of the coronary ostium, and the presence or absence of symptoms on exercise. There are some centers will go into more detailed evaluation pre-op, such as intravascular ultrasound and stress testing, etc. So these are all should be put together and have a discussion with the patient regarding risks and benefit, especially when they are asymptomatic. We tend to be conservative a little bit when they are older, and a little bit more aggressive when they are younger, to try to resolve the issue.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So those are the videos and the articles we've got for you. We're just going to go through some of the really interesting events that are coming up very shortly. So the EACTS is offering an aortic forum. You've got to go there. It's in person only. Get on the plane, get going. It's on the 21st to 23rd of June. And the real pull for this is the stellar lineup they've got. They've got Professor El Khoury, and they've got Professor Schaefer's for aortic repair, and they've got Magdi Yacoub and Tyrone David. So you can't really get better than that for an amazing aortic valve forum. So it looks really, really fantastic. The second event, I think, is really interesting. So artificial intelligence in cardiothoracic surgery. This is online, and it's free. It's on June the 20th, and Dr. Roger Diaz, Assistant Professor of Emergency Medicine at Harvard Medical School, is going to explore the potential applications of artificial intelligence in cardiothoracic surgery. I have no idea what he's going to say. I've actually registered for it, and I want to see what he says. So I think that could be great. It's free. Feel free to register. We've got a link down below, so go check it out. And the third one is an adult ECMO specialist course. 22nd to the 23rd in the Woodlands Medical Center, USA. Go check that out if you want to learn everything you've always wanted to know about ECMO but were afraid to ask. And finally, we always finish with two little small sets. Where is Diego, the world's most wildest thoracic surgeon? And he has been busy this week. First of all, he was in Milan giving a talk on uniportal robotics to the EACTS. He then popped up in the Brompton Grand Rounds, and then he has launched an amazing video about the brand new Shanghai Pulmonary Hospital training program. They have built a whole new load of buildings. They're now the world's biggest program, 140 operations a day and 20 theaters. And go check that out. We'll put a link down below if you want to have your eyes pop out with the amazingness of what they have built there. So well done to Diego. And finally, an honorable mention goes to Patrick Myers. Patrick Myers is Secretary General of EACTS, and they've been busy this week in Windsor creating the program for EACTS in October. He led this, and there was loads and loads of people. There's going to be some really new, interesting sessions coming, and Patrick's just done so much work for this. And of course, Sammy, he's a congenital surgeon. So do you know Patrick, Sammy? What do you think about him?
Absolutely a great role model, and done too many things for the EACTS and CTSNet.
Absolutely. The only thing he doesn't do is sleep. So that's all we've got time for. Sammy, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the call. We're looking forward to many, many more of your amazing videos, and it's been really wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much, Jules, and thanks to the CTSNet for this wonderful opportunity, and looking forward to working together in the future.
Great, thank you. And thank you everybody for staying it out half an hour all the way to the end. And please do tune in next week for our next edition of the CTSNet podcast.